So, this is a bit unusual since it's not Guild Wars related. However, I had a lot of fun in the past 2 weeks with Path of Exile with the new league, not the new league mechanic. I think it's utter garbage. However, I had a build idea I tested around with last league already, which I utilized more this league, especially since they added this beautiful support gem, Divergent Trauma, or more like just Trauma support. The basic idea is that you have poison and bleed reflect in combination with the tainted pact, which turns the poison on you into healing. The way reflecting is with the golden rule, and the bleed comes from the weapon, and the poison comes from the tree over here. Now, what this does is it gives us an incredible amount of regeneration and basically immunity against all dots, as well as anything that doesn't one-hit us can basically not kill us. So, to guarantee that we are not easily one-hit, we just stack a bunch of armor, we run Iron Reflex, and we just have additional damage reduction. The defensive auras are Petrified Blood, Determination, and Grace, as well as Arctic Armor, which reserves my life. The weapon itself is super cheap. It's essentially just some Screaming Essences for attack speed, until I had the chance to cause bleeding, and then I crafted additional chance to cause bleeding, because we need the bleed on us to get the engine running. Since we have trauma support, which doesn't work well with multi-strike, since it doesn't stack from the repeats itself, we have to, or we don't have to, but I decided to run without multi-strike. And since I'm not running multi-strike, I consume a lot of frenzy charges with Flickerstrike. So what this is, how this is gonna work then is we use the red trail boots, since we gain a frenzy charge every time we hit while we are bleeding ourselves. So that's why we really need this bleed chance to guarantee that we are bleeding early on in a fight, especially against single target, to get frenzy charges to be able to start hitting the boss more. The sad thing is trauma support doesn't work with swords, so you can't use stuff like Terminus Est, which has built-in frenzy charge generation. So yeah, I just went with the Siege Axe since it has the highest base attack speed, and all I cared about was just attack speed and chance to bleed, because trauma support is gonna scale our entire damage. This is not a joke, and trauma support is literally our entire damage. But yeah, it's paired with increased duration with life tap support, since I reserve pretty much all my mana, and without multi-strike, it's really, really hard to sustain the mana cost of Flickerstrike. So yeah, everything is on life tap. Flickerstrike is on life tap. We have Impale support, because we play physical, as well as close combat. We have Leap Slam as mobility with the War Chief and the Protector down here, who's also on life tap. We have Berserk, but we don't use it too often, as well as Poacher's Mark just as a free mark. Everything is on life tap. And here we have Arctic Armor with Arrogance support. This is Dread Banner. This was still a remnant from when I was on Champion, as I am right now on Slayer. But yeah, so much for the gear. The Siege Axe pretty simple. The helmet just a bunch of accuracy, life, resistance, and some intelligence on top with the mana reservation efficiency. The top has increased aura effect for grace and just general non-curse auras. On top with fractured life, I just crafted a bit with essences until I got a hybrid a hybrid life evasion, and I was lucky to just get suppress on top of it. Then I exalted cold dress on it and just crafted some more evasion on it. The glove, same thing, just a ton of accuracy. Non-val strikes gets target one additional nearby enemy, so we don't need the mastery for it. And just life and resistances, the same with the belt, just some life resistances. The red trail boots are just there for my frenzy charge generation. The tainted pact is what's enabling this build to function so well, since it turns every chaos damage over time on us into healing. And we scale the poison pretty high with trauma support, since it scales off the base damage, which is increased by the flat fist we gain. And since we reflect it on us, it's just a bunch of regeneration we gain on us, which allows us to sustain a really high amount of trauma stacks. And since I'm using divergent trauma, every trauma stack increases my attack speed by 1%. Then for the rings, we use Call of Void to chill myself and make that all my damage can chill and reduce the damage the enemies deal to me. And we're gonna combine that with a Winter Weave to pretty much not only gain immunity to chill, but also reverse the effect of chill. So we pretty much always have 30% chill on you, which turns into 30% increased action speed, which is just really great. Now for the shield, which I found is really good. I really like it. It has spell damage, added chaos, which is pretty irrelevant, as well as the energy shield, but it gives us a chance to be poisoned, which increases the poison stacks we can have on ourselves if enemies hit us, as well as give us max res +3 while we are poisoned. And since we're pretty much always poisoned, we have plus max 3 all res. And then the poison on us expires slower, which means we naturally just stack up more poison on us, which just makes us not more tanky. I mean, I guess it makes us more tanky to a certain degree, yeah. But yeah, that's it for the gear. The flasks are just generic defensive flasks with armor, gain charges when hit by an enemy, gain charges when hit by an enemy, gain charges when hit by an enemy, gain charges when hit by an enemy. The important flask, however, is the Writhing Jaw, as it spawns worms when you use it. You then can hit those worms, and what that allows us to do is we can generate bleeding and frenzy charges before a boss fight. As well as during intermission phases, we can use this to upkeep frenzy charges, to upkeep the bleed, so we can immediately go back to flickering once the boss is vulnerable again. Yeah. Yeah. The Pantheon is not freeze immunity or stun immunity, because I am freeze immune from Arctic armor and stun immune from being a slayer while I'm leeching. So I went for Soul of Lunaris, which is just more defense, as well as the reduced effect of shock on me and cannot be blinded. Since we really like accuracy, as we're running with precise technique. That's also why I have a bunch of accuracy on those two pieces. So I can barely have like 100 something more accuracy than I have life. But yeah, so much for in-game. We can then also go into Path of Building to see the tree and the DPS. Like we have poison on the enemy is usually chilled, bosses sometimes not as much, but that only makes us more tanky, doesn't matter for our DPS. We have frenzy charges from the red trail, we have perma endurance charges from the tree. Life tap, fortify, rage, we gain rage from the tree. We are always pretty much leeching, we are always chilled, we are always bleeding, poison. 11 poison on us is reasonable, it's very reasonable. So yeah. To the skills. What I have on is Flickerstrike, just with a level 18 trauma. what a level 18 trauma does instead of a level 20 is we gain less added fizz, however, we also gain a lot less damage ourselves when we use Flickerstrike from the trauma stacks. So you can go into calculations here. You see sustainable trauma of 170 would mean a self-hit damage of 3,300. However, now if we go to skills and increase the level of trauma, you can see the DPS on the left going up by like 200,000. However, if you go back to calculations, the self-hit damage also increased by a good amount. So in order to run increased duration, we cannot have a level 20 trauma support. However, increased duration is a ton of our DPS, since it allows us to stack up so much more trauma, and more trauma also means more attack speed. So yeah, we really want to run increased duration when we can. There are cases where we can't sustain increased duration, and that's when you want to run maps with reduced effect of non-curse auras, or where you have less armor, or when you're cursed with vulnerability. Those are the three mods that are really dangerous to run with increased duration. You would have to just stop hitting. You would have to interrupt your Flickerstrike every now and then to just wait a moment out and let your stacks drop. So for those maps, if you want to still run them, you can just swap out increased duration for brutality or ruthless, whatever you just have lying around, whatever you like. But yeah, the skills. This is the damage with the War Chief and the Protector. We can just disable and delete the War Chief. This is what you're looking at with just like 11 rage and no other buff, no other outside buff pretty much. Which is pretty decent. This build is was never meant to be a high DPS build. More like you will kill anything that cannot one-shot you. And that is pretty much what it is. You can kill anything as long as you don't get one-shot. But yeah, this 11 rage assumes like you just reached your max trauma stacks with this of 128, which is roughly 11 seconds into the fight. Oh, actually a bit more probably. But yeah, just 11 rage. If we just go to max rage, you will see it's a bit more, close to 2 million. And if you're at max rage and then decide to put down your totems, you can get up to over 4 million DPS, which is pretty good already. And this is not even considering Berserk. I don't think it's reasonable to consider it for the DPS, since Berserk really, I mean, it really pumps up your DPS. But this also, on the other hand, assumes you can stack up the trauma this high. But yeah, so Berserk is nice. It's a DPS increase to use, however, not as much as PUB shows. As well as you drop your rage for it, so you usually just use it towards the end, or when you really think you could use the damage reduction from Berserk as well. Which should rarely be the case, since you can tank like Shaper Slams, you can just tank them. You don't have to worry about them. You are crit immune as long as you can poison an enemy. Which, when we go now to the tree, is over here. Enemies poisoned, but you cannot deal critical strikes. I went into these two nodes to just have the generic chance to poison on hit, since we need some chance to poison on hit to then reflect it onto us. And then for just 2 more skill points, I am pretty much crit immune as long as I can poison an enemy. But yeah, the tree is nothing special. Some suppress. Chance to suppress is lucky, so we are at like 92%. Since we are not going for 100, we just went for the suppress is lucky chance node. And then we have 1 accuracy cluster, we have 2 damaging clusters with the overwhelm fizz reduction and the X over here, and the rest is just defensive. Oh no, actually we have this one for melee splash, and monsters cannot block your attack, which is really important for monsters that can block your attack because you no longer generate frenzy charges on them. You won't apply poison that you can reflect, and it's possible that you just struggle a lot against those. But yeah, so monster cannot block your attack, huge quality of life. Yeah, we have some reservation efficiency to run all the auras we have. And then yeah, like 3 offensive clusters and everything else is just defensive. Life, endurance charges, life, armor, life. Armor, this is what gives us all perma endurance charges. Chance to gain when we are hit, and we are always hitting ourselves with trauma. Then we have just life, evasion, armor, elemental resistances with iron reflexes, and more armor and evasion for endurance and frenzy charges. And once again, just a bunch of life, frenzy charge, evasion, some suppress. I have a few tattoos. They are not too important, just some life, some all attributes instead of dex or accuracy. And the one honor tattoo I have is Fortify, so I don't have to invest into this node to gain Fortify on Slayer. You could get Frenzy Charge on Slayer. You could get a Frenzy Charge tattoo, but I think the Fortify is just way more valuable. Other than that, the jewels we have are just the Forbidden Flash and Flame from Endless Hunger and the Golden Rule to Reflect. The Forbidden Flame and Flash was something I usually got when I was playing Champion, because I can just swap over for a moment, because I was more focused on Impale a bit there. Yeah, Champion is generally more DPS. Since you have access to Impale, you have additional Impale, you have additional Aura effect, you have a free banner, and free Fortify already. However, Champion doesn't have natural overleech, and you really need overleech for the amulet, as it's only while leeching. So if you drop a leech and you have a bunch of poison on you, you could just immediately die before you do a next hit, and could reapply leech. So you really need overleech, and how you could do that on Champion is with Petrified Blood, as you see the unreserved life here is a bit more than the recoverable life, which means we always have a leech going, but we cannot recover to the unreserved life, which means we will always have a makeshift overleech. But the issue is we needed immunity to bleeding, because bleeding could become a huge issue, because the poison runs out faster than the bleed does. So if the poison runs out, we don't have anything that heals us from the amulet, and then the bleed will just kill us. So we needed Endless Hunger from this layer. Yeah, Champion was, in my opinion, in my first thought process the better option. However, it turned out you just die a lot from the weird leech, because if you use your flasks can still get you to recover to full life, basically, when you have Petrified Blood. You use a flask by accident, a life flask. You're at full life, you immediately die from all the poison you have on you because your leech is killed. On top of that, there were just some other things I just didn't like, because the leech duration on Champion, the base leech, is just 5 seconds. However, on Slayer with Brutal Fervor, it's 10 seconds of leech you can stack on yourself. However, bleed can also have like a 5-second duration, and sometimes with the server ticks, etc., it can be a bit inconsistent, and you just die at the end of a bleed tick because your leech is over, but the bleed is not. But yeah, so I decided to skip champion and go back to Slayer. Not Gladiator, Slayer. And I have a lot more, a lot better experience with Slayer. I die a lot less, and yeah, it just feels a lot better to play. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. I'm gonna include one map at the end. Harbingers always make my frames drop, but I had a lot of success with Harbingers as my current Atlas strategy is pretty much stacking up kirac missions for something I've planned in the future, as well as just strong boxes, Harbinger, shrines, tormented spirits, and Alva. And then I just have more sextant uses and just more effect of my maps and running red altars. But yeah, other than that, I was able to clear every content, even Fiat, every invitation. Fiat was a bit scary because of Atziri. Atziri was the only boss I had real issues with because of the Flame Blast and her Lightning Storm that are just super dangerous. The Topaz Flask is still from the Fiat and the Atziri Witness, as well as a Ruby Flask I took, just to have some extra defense against it, since high rolls on those skills just immediately one-shot me. But yeah, the other bosses, Cortex was annoying with the slow, but not too bothersome. Chayula is super free. He just when he spins, he just charges your flasks permanently full. Shaper is pretty free, as well as Elder. But yeah, Atziri was the only difficult thing, and I had to do the Fiat twice. At the first invitation, I had Cortex together with Atziri as first boss. It was super annoying because Cortex slows you down a lot, and I had issues getting out of some of the flame blasts because of that, and just died, yeah. And the second time I attempted the Fiat, Atziri was the fourth. However, Cortex was in the first batch already, so I was able to just focus on Cortex first, get him out of the way, and then the remaining were just no issue. I just focused on the remaining first before finishing off Atziri as last. I just had to pay attention to get out of the Flame Blast as well as the Lightning Storm of her. But yeah, other than Atziri, really easy. The other invitations were not much of an issue either. Phoenix sometimes was an issue witnessing him when he stripped my fire res and then had the big explosion. However, with just a bit of paying attention, he was also rather easy. Yeah, the others all more or less like a piece of cake. But yeah, is this? Yeah. I hope you liked it. I liked it a lot. Maybe some of you want to try this as well. It's it's fun, but it's also uh, anxiety inducing since you're gonna see your life flicker down to like 20% and back to full, back to 20, back to full a lot. However, like I said, stuff that doesn't one hit you literally cannot kill you. You are immune to all degens. You can just stand in Shaper balls. You can just stand in the Maven degen balls. For Maven, you have to actually swap out Flickerstrike for like Frenzy for the brain phase. Since the laser does kill the region you gain from Tainted Pact. But yeah, aside of Maven, everything can just be flickered through. Super fun build. I'm really surprised it turned out better than I first anticipated. And I'm just super happy. I mean, it's pretty min-maxed by now, aside of the weapon, I would say, and the belt, but it's still a super cheap build. I think I was already able to run it with just like maybe 2 divine investments, and one of those divines were my red trail boots. Like I said, you just need a weapon with chance to cause bleeding, you get chance to poison from the tree, and if you play Slayer, you have your overleech already. And then you just have to care at the start. You probably can't run with increased duration, or don't use divergent trauma support for additional attack speed. But yeah, I hope you have fun. Maybe you try this out yourself. I had a lot of fun. I'm gonna play this next league as well.